can go along with that. Okay. So this first call, this is a call from up in the north area. This is a 24-year-old female who jumped out of a open Jeep on Washington Avenue. Friends were able to get the vehicle stopped, to kind of get her wrangled out of traffic and off to the side of the road. This case is a little bit older. It's about 4 years old, and this particular responding agency at the time did not have ketamine at the time. And they were going to go straight over to St. Anthony's North. This was about Washington and 84th Avenue. And so they were basically battling with her that entire drive. Those are her vital signs coming into the ER. So very hypertensive, very tachycardic. She had super rapid, pressured speech, nonsensical words. And she was a little scrappy thing, like maybe 5'2", maybe 100 pounds. Little scrappy thing. And Dr. Brandy was working, ended up giving her IV ketamine in hospital, and then ended up giving her 4 amps of bicarb on top of that because she had so much cardiac instability and acidosis that was presenting. She was just super sick. She got admitted to the ICU, and while in the ICU, she started to present with signs and symptoms of rhabdomyolysis, which and ended up with her being on dialysis for a few days.
Wow.
Do you guys understand what rhabdo is, or do you know what rhabdo is?
Yep.
Okay. So anytime we go out and ask the human body to go to work, we should be burning fat or burning tissue of some kind. And that's why we then rehydrate and renourish so that we can rebuild the body. So when we have somebody like this that is super, super, super combative and their vital signs are way out of the ranges, they're doing that in kind of a hyperdrive mode. So she's burning a lot of muscle tissue. When we burn muscle tissue, the body releases a substance called myoglobin. And myoglobin is a great big, thick, sticky kind of molecule or substance. If you've ever had like a road rash, kind of scrape, that first sticky yellowish material that you get is very similar to what myoglobin's like on the inside. So then the myoglobin's getting processed through the body, and it's going to come up against the little tubules in the kidneys, and it's going to be too big to go through them. And because it's so big, it starts to sludge down the kidneys, and they just can't work very well. And that's what we call rhabdomyolysis. So the body now, we're losing kidney function. And we rely on dialysis to pull all of that junk out of there to kind of give the kidneys a break. Another example kind of that is if you would take like a drinking straw and take a jar of honey and pour it over the drinking straw, some of that honey is going to go into the straw, but a lot of it is not going to be able to permeate through that, and it's just going to kind of splash around. But that's very similar to what myoglobin is doing to the tubules in the kidneys. Okay.
What are the causes?
It's overuse with poor hydration. For rehydration, typically. And we can see this in anybody. We see this on a lot of our special events. So this isn't just something that we would see in Excited Delirium. We can see this on anybody who is physically using their body and not appropriately rehydrating. Okay. The body has to have lots of fluid to kind of dilute that all out so that the kidneys can process it. So if you guys are out doing those 5Ks and motocrosses and things like that, especially during the summer, when we're seeing some of these people that are tachycardic, hot to the touch, not rehydrating, got to push the fluids. Okay. We had a couple of guys that came out of the State Patrol Academy. They had gotten a new drill sergeant down at the State Patrol Academy and had really, really been pushing them on their first PT day and not allowing for good rehydration breaks. And we had 2 of their cadets come in very, very sick. One of them spent about a month with us and lost some kidney function overall. He was very, very sick. And he was a state patrolman for a day, and now they own him forever. It just, those 2 guys were very sick. So it can happen to anybody. And we just happen to see it a lot in Excited Delirium. You can also see rhabdo present in burn patients. We can see it happen a lot in the elderly, especially like little grandmas who have slip and falls that are unwitnessed, maybe are down. It could be as little as 6 hours or so, and sometimes a couple of days, just from them laying. There's tissue breakdown, and they're not eating, hydrating, that kind of thing. Body can't function appropriately because they're stuck due to a broken hip or whatever. We can see rhabdo present in the elderly as well.
We had a patient fell in her basement, lay there for 24 hours, bruised from here all the way to here, anterior, medial, and posterior. And we took her in. She had a fractured humerus, but she also had a CPK of 266.
Yeah. And we're going to talk about lab values just a little bit because we'll really see those pop in some of these patients. So agitation is going to be defined as an emotional state of excitement or restlessness. And then we generally see a psychomotor component that goes along with that. Sometimes it can be the side effect of antipsychotic medications, and not very commonly just because of a single antipsychotic medications. A lot of times it's because they've added a new one or changed a medication, and now we're seeing a reaction to that. Sometimes we see it due to mental health disorders. We're going to talk about a patient that came into North a week ago Monday that was pretty interesting. And more commonly, you guys are going to see this happening because of sympathomimetic drugs or amphetamines. So our cocaines and meth kids. Yay, raves.
Definitely.
Delirium is going to be an acute or kind of sudden onset. We can see it develop over a couple of days. That more commonly is going to happen in your patient that is a true mental health patient. So somebody that is like a bipolar manic depressive, schizophrenic, something like that, where they've stopped taking their medications, and we're starting to see that behavior shift. Okay. There's generally a hyperactive delirium, and those are most commonly the patients that we're going to come in contact with. We just don't see people activate EMS very often for the guy sitting on his couch eating Cheetos. I'm not saying it can't happen, as people call 911 for all kinds of weird reasons, but the hypoactive phase or quiet delirium, we rarely come in contact with those. And this is kind of the progression of behaviors that we will see out of people. Us as everyday humans very commonly will go through kind of the left-hand side of this, but we also have kind of a shutdown button that will allow us to stop those processes and kind of reset. People that are in an excited delirium or a state of excitation will more commonly continue through this process. And if we don't get it shut down, then you could add death, sudden cardiac death up there as well. This is our list of kind of the characteristics of these patients that we see that are combative or assaultive. They are very, very commonly young men, especially between 16 and 25. We're starting to see some of our excited delirium patients, the age on those climb just a little bit, but overall our combative patients are going to be in that other age range. Very commonly have drugs and alcohol on board. Not uncommon to have a history of physical abuse. It doesn't necessarily mean that that's why they are combative. It's part of the statistical subset. We very commonly will see a psychiatric disorder that goes along with it. It could be schizophrenia or multiple personality disorders. Very, very commonly we see impulse control disorder being the primary reason that we see this happening. That diagnosis goes back to bullet point number 1. And sometimes they don't get that diagnosis until after this event has happened. With our young men, they already tend to be more risk takers, more of the dude hold my beer or dude watch this kind of mindset. Not all the time. And the other thing that they are more commonly in contact sports, do risk-taking things like more skateboarding, BMXing, motocrossing, that kind of thing. And a lot of times it's done without helmets. So we see these young men, young males with concussive syndromes, especially to the frontal lobe, or they'll have single big frontal lobe injuries. And your impulse control comes out of your frontal lobe. So the mechanisms up in your brain that are able to produce the little angel and the little devil that sit on your shoulder that argue back and forth and say, you should choose better, no, don't. when we have those frontal lobe injuries, it's like it kicks the angel to the curb and the little devil's sitting over here going, oh yeah.
Party time.
Yeah, we're totally gonna do this, dude. And so then we will very frequently see those addictive behaviors pop up, whether it's drugs, alcohol, gambling, sex, porn, any of those things that need to have that yes-no factor, and only yes is answering right now, are some of that impulse control thing that we will see happen. Sometimes it can be due to neurological impairments. Some of those can be organic brain syndrome. We can see it from seizure disorders, prolonged seizure issues. The mental retardation component of it is really more based as a maturity issue. That we have these folks that are in adult bodies with adult hormones that are working through them, but they have the decision-making capability sometimes of an 8 or 10-year-old. And so when we're seeing combative behavior out of them, it really needs to be related more back to like a temper tantrum, because that's the mental age component that you're dealing with. They just don't have the mature coping mechanisms to deal with anger, frustration, being told no, things like that. And then with the struggle overall, what's happening in the body when we introduce whatever we introduce to the body that is causing this initial kickoff. First thing we see is a big catecholamine rush, and that should be the kickoff for your fight or flight mechanisms. The adrenal glands are releasing epi and norepi into the system, and when it does that, then it's going to really start to change how the body reacts overall. It's going to drive your heart rate up, and it can push it way up. BP is going to go up, and because your heart rate is going way up, that's going to increase the oxygen demand on the body overall. So as the body deoxygenates a little bit, then we see widespread vasoconstriction, and that's going to include across the cardiac wall and across the brain. If all of this could happen and we could not deoxygenate the heart and brain, it would be better. But we don't get to selectively do that, so it doesn't work out very well. It deoxygenates, then we start to see that play an effect on the sodium-potassium pump across the body, and the serum potassium levels start to climb. And this is where they're going to enter what we consider to be the period of peril, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more in a couple of slides. Some of these patients are going to present with what's called neuroleptic malignant syndrome. And most commonly, if we have these patients coming out of facilities, like a psych care unit or something like that, it's because of a reaction with an antipsychotic medication. They've either changed their meds or added a med, and for some reason it's just kicked off that cascade and they're just not doing very good. But it's a little bit more controllable. When we're seeing it in the field, more commonly due to the recreational use of amphetamines, this is where we really need to be looking at this and considering it to be a life threat. These patients either have a missing or malfunctioning dopamine 2 receptor. And that's essentially the brakes for the system. So that's why you can run across these guys that do cocaine all day, every day. They're champs. But they never go into this. They never go into excited delirium. They never have these issues. And it's because their dopamine receptors are working appropriately. So as their body ramps up, the dopamine receptors are able to kick up and say, hey, let's put the brakes on, slow it down, easy. These people don't have that option. So that body escalates, heart rate goes up, BP goes up, respiratory rate goes up, and there's nothing to slow it down. Okay. This is the presentation that we kind of see. We use the fever mnemonic. They will present very febrile and not like 100 or 101. It's probably going to be 104, 105. They're going to be hot to the touch. Try to remember that wherever you're coming into contact with these folks, that presentation may be a little bit off. If they're super sweaty and they're outside or they go outside, that's going to surface cool them. So make sure that, when you're checking temp or feeling these patients, if you're not doing it with a thermometer right away, try, feeling under their armpits, that kind of thing. Do they feel really, really warm to the touch? Just kind of be aware of that. They will have some presenting encephalopathies. So you may hear very odd, bizarre speech patterns, disconnected sentences. They may have hallucinations, just very odd behaviors that don't make sense for what's going on. Vital signs are going to be pretty unstable. And then we're going to see in hospital, when we start drawing labs on them, they're going to have elevated blood enzymes. And that's going to be CPK, and usually their CKMB is also going to be elevated. Both of those measurements measure burning tissue. Back in the day, when Art Flippin was just a young spry man.
When I was Chris's age.
Yes, because he was one time.
No.
CPKs were what we used to look for cardiac patients. And then there was some super smart guy out there who's like, I think I can totally find what the cardiac component looks like. And he was able to cipher off troponin out of the CPK component. So we used to just draw CPKs to look for cardiac patients. And all it would tell us was that they were burning tissue. If you had a guy that was in a car crash and had his arm trapped under something for an hour, he also was going to have an elevated CPK. Grandma who fell down in her house yesterday is also going to have an elevated CPK. So anything that causes tissue burning is going to pop that up. Okay. And then we will also see muscle rigidity in these patients. And when we look at a couple of these videos, you'll see the cops trying to handcuff these patients. And it's like they're resisting. Like they can't get their arms back. It's because they can't. And a lot of times the cops are reading that as them being combative and being resistive. And so they'll force that. And then afterwards we'll see soft tissue damage, whether it's ligament or tendon or muscle tearing because of that forcing. And we'll have some of these patients that can be in a kind of continual marked agitation or paranoid state. And these sometimes can be these patients that have long-term exposures to some of our amphetamines, whether they're cocaine body packers or they work in a cocaine facility, lab, plant.
Sounds less.
I don't really know what it's called.
Where the stuff is made.
Yeah. Where they put it all together and stuff.
Right.
I don't know what it's called, but where they do that. And then with their excited delirium syndromes, this is typically going to be a pretty acute onset. We'll see this happening over probably a span of 15 to 30 minutes, depending on their overall health status and the amount of recreational pharmaceutical they are using. They will go into a delirium. And remember with delirium is different than dementia. Delirium is temporary. Dementia is permanent. So when we're seeing this happen, this is something that will wane off and go away. They will have very combative, violent behaviors, and sometimes just like superhuman strength, bizarre superhuman strength. The good news is they can't do that for very long. And we'd really like them not to. There's going to be a physical restraint component to this game that we play in some way, but we would like to minimize that as much as possible. And that's why we want to make sure that you guys are using ketamine or using a benzo and trying to stop the fight. That's the biggest thing that we're trying to do is they just need a nap. We just want to take a nap. So as soon as you guys are interacting with security or whoever, getting that opportunity to get medications on board and getting them kind of shut down is going to be super important. If we don't stop that physical restraint component, then we really run the risk of pushing these patients to a sudden cardiac death. And once they do that, they're done. They are not going to be receptive to resuscitative measures. Their body is not healthy enough to be receptive to CPR and drugs. Very different from even our little old guys who have a VFib or VTAC arrest. Sometimes their body is super willing to do what it needs to do, but the heart wasn't quite coordinated enough to do that. So their body is willing to take over and say, hey, yeah, I'll do whatever you ask if you can get that other guy worked out. These guys, it's the other way around. The heart is able to function, but because everything else is so sick, we can't get that recoordinated back the other direction. And this is just kind of the pathophys of the delirium. We see the circulating catecholamines, which are going to reach a peak level at about 1 to 3 minutes after exercise or combativeness, anything that's causing big muscle movement across the body. Norepinephrine in the system is going to be targeting your alpha-1 and your beta-1 receptors. Do you guys know what your alpha-1 receptors do? So alpha-1 receptors are going to be what drives some of that muscle rigidity. Okay. Do you guys know what your beta-1 receptors do? This guy is probably more common. We don't talk about alpha receptors a lot in EMS. We do talk about our beta receptors quite a bit. Your beta-1 receptors are going to be what causes your heart rate to go up and cause the oxygen demand on the body to increase. Okay. You guys know what beta-2 receptors do?
Nope.
The heart.
Is it blood
Maybe,
pressure?
I don't know.
It's going to be your respiratory.
Respiratory.
It's going to be a bronchodilator, your bronchodilation. Okay. And then the other part that plays a factor in this are those serum potassium levels. Everybody in this room should have a serum potassium level that sits somewhere in that range. And we know that almost all of us are really close in that range, if not in it, because we would be symptomatic if we weren't. The human body really likes you to be in that range. It's a very small range as compared to a lot of our other lab values, but it really likes potassium in that little window. And we can see people outside of those ranges, whether they're hyperkalemic or hypokalemic, they can be very symptomatic, even have cardiac events because they're outside of those ranges. For whatever reason, our excited delirium patients, as they're going through this process, are going to be pushing that potassium level, and we're going to see it up around 9 or 10. And we don't know how they're able to really maintain that, with the exception of catecholamines will protect the heart to some degree with hyperkalemia, but not be super protective of hypokalemia. So as that serum potassium level is rising, the catecholamines are a little bit protective. And then when they're in that period of peril, there's going to be a message that goes out to the body. The brain sending out a message going, whoa, the potassium is freakishly high, what's happening? We better fix this. So all of a sudden we see this great big flip-flop, and the body uptakes all that potassium and tries to get it put back to work. And when it does so, they go from being hyperkalemic to hypokalemic. And now they are in that unprotected area. And that's when we'll see, sometimes we can see a widened QT interval, which we'll talk about. There may be a period of torsades and then sudden cardiac death. We don't catch that on cardiac strips very often because we can't get combative patients on monitors. It just doesn't work out very well. And so then we'll see that asystole, and it's usually a giant metabolic acidosis that's combined with it, and they're just super unreceptive to being fixed. So we're going to look at a couple of videos. Usually I have to slide this over to a half a screen. Let's see, put it on.
This is almost excited delirium, almost always drug induced. Anything else that would put you in that state?
Not really. You might see some very similar signs and symptoms with somebody that's in a thyroid storm. They would be very, very febrile, tachycardic, that kind of thing, but may not be combative. And if they do get combative, a lot of times it's because they are hypoxic. This is usually drug-based.
Come on, man.
And if you watch, these cops end up shooting each other with pepper spray.
Sit down.
This gentleman also has been gut shot. There's another version of this video where you can see his belly that's not grayed out because he was naked. They're always going to be naked. That's the way it goes. Start taking off their clothes. They're super febrile, they're hot, they just start losing their clothes. And nobody wants to wrestle the big naked guy running down the street. And you guys can pull some of these up on YouTube. There's not a lot of newer videos out there. This one's kind of interesting, like I said, because he has been shot and he's still acting like this. And I love this guy. He's got some wicked core strength. And he's also presenting perfect opportunity to administer ketamine.
Right.
Right there.
He's
Each cheek.
thinking about it.
Just each cheek. There you go, buddy. I think he could be transitioning into a werewolf, but I'm not sure. Not normal behavior.
No.
No. So this guy is going to be in a barber shop. A couple of things to watch on this video. You'll be able to see some of that muscle rigidity in this guy. And then you're also going to see he ends up trying to like come out the door, and he runs into a metal cabinet that I think was a kind of a display case, and he like fillets himself open on it because when the cops end up starting to try and get him handcuffed, he's bleeding like a sieve.
Mm.
And he has some kind of entertaining verbiage. He also provides a good lesson. Don't get bit. I love it. He's so fun. Put it in the paper. Put it in the paper. He wants to be in the news. And I don't really know what kind of haircuts they offer at this barber shop, but he's making.
Yeah.
There's that metal cabinet right there. I guess you can get a fan.
I ain't got no cups no more.
And this cop right here by the door, this is the guy that you can see it really. Got a lot of blood around him. And because they're so hypertensive and so tachycardic, even a small injury is just bleeding crazy. And then this last guy I want to show you, this next video is a little bit longer. This video is a little bit older. This particular EMS agency at the time only had Haldol available to them.
Back in the day.
Yeah, and Haldol works okay on some patients, but the ones that it does work on, it's still going to take about 10 minutes to work. So you've still got about 10 minutes of fight time to go. It can be a very long time. It can feel like an hour. Things I like about this video, you're going to see this guy be a little bit compliant, and then we're going to see him escalate and kind of go through some of those changes. You'll see his respiratory rate change. He's going to have very bizarre speech, and you can tell that his brain is trying to put together the pieces, that it's trying to form sentences, but they're going to be broken and almost reversed sometimes. He does seem to have a dying wish. You guys will pick up on that. And the other thing I like about this is the cop that is filming this. It's on a pocket cam. This cop is great. He is very soft-spoken. He develops a plan that includes his other police officers in EMS, and is well communicated. He even discusses with dispatch that he wants priority traffic, that nobody else should be on his channel, that kind of thing. And so it's a good example of that kind of cross teamwork that we should be seeing happen. And then we'll talk about how they restrain him, because that is not the way we would like to see them restrained. And I'm going to fast forward through the 911 call of this, because it's pretty long.
I can just blast through the door.
This is a different one on services at night.
It is.
Hi, it's okay. It's okay. It's okay. Yes, I'm not. This is the last heartbeat. It's okay. It's okay. I understand. Isn't gonna die, but I'm going to. Isn't gonna die, but I'm going to. You're okay. I'm going to die.
He tries a few times and then he can get the sentence out the right way.
But it's okay. What is his name? Tim. Tim, we need to go to the hospital. But I'm going to. 9102. Have to go across and come up to the address.
And go across is their ambulance
But I'm
is
gonna
standing
hear
by.
the heartbeat. What's his first name again? Oh, I'm going to die. Tim. But I'm going to lay down on the ground. Can you lay down for me? I'm going to die, but Tim, I'm going to die, and you understand now. It isn't that fucking weird, but I'm going to. Because I'm gonna die, but I'm gonna look around. Tim, I'm gonna die. Sugar's gonna run out the side. It's okay, ma'am. At this point, let's put the clothes away. Okay, this is a reaction to something. Okay, we'll get him to the hospital.
Linda, honey, you're not listening.
Mama just wants to.
Listen.
Mama just wants to put a clothes on her baby's leg.
Bicycle across it.
She has a lot of furniture. It's very clean, but there's a lot.
Just relax, man. Just relax.
Lot going on.
Move so.
We get two to the back and kind of come in that entrance, officers. Okay, in case we have some movement. I eventually, yeah, I think what we're gonna do is if we get those two to the back and get them in here, once we do go hands, they're probably gonna have to go with feet, and then we'll get them over. Do we have the medics ready? Okay. All right. All right, let's move. All right, just relax. Get the medics up. Let's get them on. Let's get the medics strapped onto the cot.
Enter zombie.
Tim.
Look how big his pupils are.
That's it.
So they're initiating their sedation protocol, which is 10 of Haldol, but now you got 10 minutes.
Get on his legs. Lay across his legs. You want to go on a board with him and then strap him and then get him out, or what do you think? I think we can wrap it in this blanket. I just don't want him to get free if he. Yeah. Maybe the stretcher. Sure. As long as we can secure him with strap. I'm gonna grab my balls. What? But I grabbed my balls one last time. It's okay. I can hear this one. It's weird. Even though I'm okay, I'm gonna grab my balls. Please, and I tap my hand. 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 No, it's okay. Please. Don't fight. Please, and I tap my hand. I fought. Please, and I tap my hand. I fought. Please, and I fought. We're gonna get you to the hospital. Please, and I taught. Relax. Please, and last time I shook and I taught my. Please. Please. Tim, please. And last time I grabbed my shook. Please, and last time I grabbed my balls and I shook. Please, and last time my balls and I shook. Please, and last time I grabbed my balls and I shook. Please, and last time I shook and I grabbed my balls. Please, and last time I shook and I grabbed my balls. Please, and last time I shook and I grabbed my balls and I shook. Please, and last time I shook and I grabbed my balls and I. Yeah, it's fine.
Probably not healthy.
No, I'm serious.
But one of the things we want to think about when we see these patients that are breathing like that, we don't want to stop that. We want to stop the combativeness, but we don't want to drop their respiratory rate. That's why we like to use ketamine, because ketamine is going to leave that intact, and that respiratory drive is what's buffering the acidosis in the body. So if we knock that out and that acidosis is allowed to climb, we can end up back at that big cardiac instability point. So you can take away the fight, leave the respiratory drive alone. That's a good thing. Okay. And then the other thing you can kind of see in this, and I don't have to stop it again, but that they've got a strap across his chest. We really don't want that. Our restraint protocols, we want you to do everything that you can so that the chest wall can expand and contract as much as possible so they can use their lungs. We prefer that they are restrained one arm up, one arm down. and that you're using shoulder straps, that it's a crisscross across the chest. Which you'll see with him, it'll also eliminate them sitting up like this guy is. Other things that you can do to help kind of fight some of that combativeness as the drugs are setting in is if you can put a C-collar on them. C-collars do a couple of things. They help control the biter and the spitter. They keep it in one direction. And it also eliminates their ability to pick up their head so they can't activate their abs. So it takes away some of the fight. And an appropriately applied C-collar will also help keep their chin up in alignment and that airway open. Okay? So it can be used well as an adjunct tool in this case. But straps across the shoulders, not across the chest wall. We really don't care what you do from the waist down. There are a couple of new devices out there. North Glen Ambulance or North Glen PD is carrying a device called the WRAP. And the best way that I could describe it to you, it is like a KED for the legs. That then has a set of shoulder straps that come up and crisscross and a little Velcro section around the belly. And the Velcro section across the belly is like a soft neoprene. And it has two little arm straps so that it crosses their wrists and locks them onto that. But you can apply this pretty loose and still control the arms. And then the legs it completely envelops the legs from like feet to hips because it truly is like a KED. So if you had somebody that was really kicking and that kind of thing, you could probably throw a KED on them and just take away all of that. And work a little bit better than straps because, as you guys know, they can get their legs out of it. Cram straps pretty quickly. So we don't really care what you do, waist down. As long as their chest wall can expand and contract and their airway is open, that's our biggest thing. Okay.
So, one interesting thing, we had a patient similar to this at Base Nectar, and kind of going through the same scenario. I'm dead. And we got him down on the ground, and he started bashing his head on the concrete. So watch for that. I just finally had to grab his hair and put my hand between it, try and hold his head down, because he's just bam.
And that's some of that
And just-
encephalopathy that'll present. They do some of the strangest things. I showed a video to the other group, the Donald Lewis video, and he grinds his face into the asphalt. I mean, he just keeps doing it. And you know his teeth and everything are raking across the asphalt. And they just don't know. And they can really, really hurt themselves.
Oh my gosh, yeah, this guy hit the concrete. Crack. I'm just like, what the hell?
And you can throw anything underneath there. If you can get a blanket, part of your kit, anything that can help just absorb some of that impact if they're doing that. But until you can get drugs on board, they can be a handful. And it's giving me just a little chest pain because you know Base Nectar is coming to the First Bank Center.
Yep.
Yeah. So I always.
And the sad part is I work all these shows, and I always carry ketamine, and I've never given it because I'm too busy holding the guy down. And somebody else come by and inject him.
And we know
but
we know that Base Nectar is going to the First Bank Center because nobody else will let him back. So,
no, because it's
Yeah.
insane.
wow. So I think we're going to put a doctor with them this time.
All right.
Not a bad, a young doctor.
Oh yeah, it'll be
Good
Dr.
shape.
Passo or Dr. Richter, I'm sure. Dr. Passo doesn't mess around with the concepts.
No, I know.
We have somebody out at Red Rocks almost all shows now during the summer.
Good idea.
It helps take care of those patients, but it also allows us to clear the ones that can have somebody else hold their hair back and barf into a bucket because they can't drink beer, and they don't need to go to the ER. So that's kind of nice. So let's finish watching Little Smarty Pants. Because I don't want you to miss the capush section. It's too much fun.
Oh, I'm serious. It's okay. I'm serious. I'm fucking serious. This is what I'm about to. No, I love you, Ethel. It's okay.
I love you, Ethel.
It's all right.
I'm serious, little boy. I love you, Ethel.
Don't kill me. Don't kill me. It's gonna hurt you. This is what I'm about. This is what I'm about. Nobody's gonna hurt you. Come on. Nobody's gonna hurt you. Just relax. Lay your head back and relax, Tim. Tim, lay your head back and relax. Kapush! We're good. Kapush! Kapush! Tim, you're all right. Kapush! Kapush! Tim, you're gonna hurt yourself. I don't wanna die.
Every time you get off, that's all I
Seriously, we're gonna go to the hospital.
like,
Seriously,
oh my God.
we're gonna go to the hospital. Come on. No. This That's what I'm
But you
gonna
got a
do.
gun,
Son
it's
of
fire.
a gun, no! Tim, relax.
You guys carry spit nets or spit masks?
Tim, relax.
No.
It's okay. Yes, it is.
I'm not, I don't.
It's
the
not
spit
okay.
thing,
It will be
not
okay. You gotta calm down. Okay. You gotta calm down.
I just put an N95 over there.
This is gonna die.
Great.
Last time
This is gonna die. No, relax. No. This is gonna die though. This is gonna die though.
Remember, your mom's all worried about you. Try to relax so we can help.
No!
That ain't gonna
Don't kill me!
Oh, I forgot my
I know,
mom.
but this is gonna die
I
though.
forgot my mom.
This one.
Yeah, thanks for
All the
reminding
meat
me.
I've eaten, I forgive myself.
Are we good on those arms?
This is gonna be in a
I
minute.
can't just correct it. All the meat I've eaten, I forgive myself.
I think the thing that always gets me is the cops always think that they can use me.
Also loose in
There's
case-
nobody home.
You're questioning fly out! You fly
But yes, the no guy went away.
Yeah, and that's that big encephalopathy that's presenting, and that we just, there isn't any, especially with your excited learning patients. Verbal judo's just not gonna work with these.
Right. All you're doing is wasting time.
Yeah.
It's gonna be transporting instead of talking.
So for you guys, obviously, we want to make sure that safety for you guys and your responding security or PD is paramount. And so following the restraint protocols, making sure that you're doing so safely. If you have cops that are restraining in a way that is not in compliance with our protocols, we say something. Don't let the cops get hung up on a program initiative that this guy has to be hobbled or that kind of thing. It will kill them. Up and lay them face down, so ankles are hooked to the hands now.
Oh, contact kind of like.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that really restricts chest flow and chest movement, and it's just going to drive that acidosis through the roof. So we want to make sure that we're doing anything that we can to allow them the capacity to breathe. Okay. A lot of times these patients are going to be naked. It's just what happens. They get so febrile, they start shedding clothes.
That's part of the problem too, is if you start covering them back up to save their decency or somebody else's, all you're doing is worsening the hyperthermia problem.
And it's just including, prolonging that fight process. They're going to be naked until you get them in your room. It's the way we came into this world. I mean,
That's it.
Some of them go out that way.
And then as soon as you can, please make sure that you're getting good assessments done on these patients and ruling out anything that we could potentially fix. Do they have a reason that they could be hypoxic? Do they have hypoglycemia? Is there potentially a reason that they have a post-head injury, something along those lines that we need to be aware of and fix? Using as little physical restraint as we can to get them chemically restrained would be the preference. And then good frequent reassessments and good documentation. And that should include, if you had to physically restrain them, how did you do it? Describe that you put left arm up to the top of the pram, right arm down, that you use soft restraints, or you use 2 sets of handcuffs and you had a police officer with you, or that you rechecked sensation and pulses past the restraint points, those kinds of things. That you reassess the patient's airway and suction if necessary. That we just have so many of these cases that end up in court that you'll find it very, very beneficial to have very pointed documentation on these cases. Verbal de-escalation really does not work on these patients. It works better on your true psych-based patients. Your bipolar manic depressives, your schizophrenics, multiple personality disorder patients, they generally have some base level of cognitive reasoning, and therefore verbal de-escalation tends to work a little bit better, where your excited delirium patients just don't. They're physically sick, so it just doesn't work as well. Soft restraints, you can get creative and use what you have available. Our biggest thing that we don't want to see is we don't want to see you guys using Curlex. Curlex as a restraint, it tightens down and it gets very narrow and it doesn't loosen very well once it's tight. So we can see people with vascular and neurological injuries with the use of Curlex. So we'd really prefer that wasn't used. Hard restraints, if you have to use handcuffs, take whoever put them on with you. No zip ties, period. Don't let the cops use them. If they use them, they need to get them off and we need to get other restraints on just absolutely as soon as possible. Sometimes we may have enough out of control people that zip ties might be what they're down to, but we need to get them removed as soon as we can. And leather restraints are great. We just don't have a lot of agencies that carry them. They also require a key. There are some out there that use the same key as a handcuff key, and there are some out there that use a flat key like a luggage key or a key out of a diary. It's just a flat key. Leather restraints are great once you put them on. They don't tighten or loosen. You can't really make leather restraints too tight, and they're pretty effective. They're just not widely used.
Wasn't the Curlex thing a big thing, big old thing with one of the fire departments around here in the last couple of years?
I don't know.
I mean, unfortunately, we used it for years,
Yeah.
even carried leathers.
Yeah.
But everybody started doing the Curlex because it was
Fast.
faster,
Fast.
simpler,
There was a
time to
huge
stretch it.
lawsuit about it.
Yeah.
Mark was telling me.
Yeah,
about
because
that.
it caused some nerve damage to
Yeah.
some wrists. People lost use of hands. And Curlex was super easy, and we all learned
Oh,
the
yeah,
the
looping down.
Curse, but
the nookie knot or whatever you want to call it that would flip around both wrists, and then you could tie it around the waist or tie it around the legs. I mean, one of the biggest tricks that we used to do, years ago, was using it on the wrist and then feeding it through the legs. So if they tried to lift their wrists up, it strangled their genitals, and so they would put their hands back. So, but it was problematic because, and then you couldn't get it off. You couldn't sometimes even get scissors into it to get it released. And we have some agencies that have just had webbing with Velcro made that loops on both ends of just a piece of webbing so that one goes to the pram, one goes to the wrist. And that's fine. We like to see something that's 2 to 3 inches wide because then it won't compress on the nerves. Or you can use any of the commercial stuff. And then making sure that we're emphasizing scene safety with whoever is involved. Please, you guys, remember that almost everybody out there has a cell phone right now, and they record on it. There is a video out there, and it might be a Base Nectar video when they were up in Clear Creek County, and they are on the frontage road with an excited delirium patient and 200 hippies, and traffic on I-70 going by with this guy. And everybody is videotaping it, everybody's involved, so now they've lost scene safety. There's like 4 responders, there's 2 cops, 2 EMS, with 200 people, and the whole crowd is escalating because they think they're mistreating this excited delirium. And so please be aware of your surroundings, that somebody is watching crowds, not just watching excited delirium die. And remember that somebody's always going to be videotaping. So the sooner you can get yourself and get them out of those settings, the better. And then we always want to assume that there's something medically driving this. Hopefully we can fix it. And sometimes the fix just might be a bucket of ketamine. Before we get into the meds section, I just want to tell you guys, just as I guess kind of a little bit of an anecdotal patient that we had that was more on the psych end of things. This patient came into St. Anthony's about 5:30 in the morning last Monday. And it kind of got everybody's attention because it was at the walk-in door to the ER, and the Fed Center cop came in and asked for help. And Megan, who some of you guys know, was working as a tech, and Carly was working as a tech, and they were both out in triage. So 2 EMTs out in triage and the security guard, they go out with the Fed Center cop to see what's going on. And there is a dad with his grown son. Both of them are covered in blood. right there at the pull-up entrance, and the son is very, very combative. He's about 22 years old. The dad discloses that he's a known schizophrenic, and is very obviously in some sort of a break. And the Fed Center cop helps the girls get him into the wheelchair and handcuffs him to the wheelchair. And this kid had woke his dad up at about 5:15 in the morning and said, "Dad, I stabbed myself." And his dad, kind of creaked open the bedroom door and was like, "Oh my God." The kid had on just a pair of boxers, and the dad had thrown a jacket around him. And they lived about 3 blocks from the hospital, just on the south side of Alameda. And so they were driving over. Well, the son was trying to crash the car, and that's when the Fed Center cop noticed this car weaving down the road and followed him into the hospital. But he had stabbed himself approximately 15 times in the gut, so he was eviscerating out of every one of the holes. He had intestines coming out everywhere. Megan said you could see the flap of his liver, and he had opened his arms from the AC to the wrist to the point where you could see all the muscle tissue in the bone. And he's just bleeding. And so there was an ER nurse coming out about the time they were getting him handcuffed to the chair, and Megan turns and says, "Go activate T10, we're coming straight up." And I guess the nurse's eyes got really big.
Of course.
We don't do that,
Yeah, we do.
but we're going to tonight. So
This day,
yeah. So they had to take him, through the walk-in entrance, through the ER, and I guess it looked like they had drug a body through the whole thing. And they get to the T10 elevator and go upstairs. Well, the Fed Center cop didn't get in the elevator with them, so now they're up to the T10 room, and they have nobody to unhandcuff him. And the T10 surgical staff they're going to start filtering in. We don't just unlock a closet and they pop out like little they show up there. And so here is Megan. She sends Carly to go get the Fed Center cop. The ER nurse is coming up the stairs, and so they have him handcuffed to this wheelchair in T10, trying to get him no IVs. He's still in his clothes, and now the surgical staff is showing up, and I guess they were very taken back that they didn't really know what to do. I mean, they're very used to people preparing patients and having them come in on a pram with IVs started and sometimes intubated, and life is awesome, and not screaming and combative and bleeding everywhere right there in all their glory. So
The anesthesiologist is like,
yeah, he's like, whoa. So they were trying to get IVs started up there, and everybody's like, where the hell is an IV kit in T10? Nobody even freaking knows where the IV kit is in T10 because they all come in with IVs. They're like, we don't know. But Megan said it was very humbling and humanizing because this kid, in his very combative state, also had very clear moments of lucidity. And he would be very apologetic. He would be very remorseful. He would feel bad about scaring his dad. And then would turn around and say things like he really wished that he had used a gun instead of a knife because he was tired of feeling this way. And so seeing this really combative, true mental health patient that has really caused harm to himself, also trying to cipher through those behaviors and those thought processes, she said was just very humanizing. So it's just kind of that thing, regardless of what their state is, to try to remember to be nice, to be polite, to be respectful of their situation, because we don't know what their struggle is. We also don't know what they're going to remember. And if they come out of something remembering something, we hope that it was us being good to them. Because the court cases that go because we've been mean to them go very poorly. People don't sue when you're nice to them.
did he live?
He did live.
Wow.
He had a lactate of 22, which is almost unsurvivable.
Right.
It really is. But he did live. He had stabbed himself so many times, but it's one of the things that we see with self-stabbings is that you generally have the knife enter so slow that your bowel and everything kind of move out of the way. So he had nicked the small bowel in one spot, and he nicked his own appendix, so that they just took it out. Yeah, so that's done. And they did have to do some work on his arms, but he did live. So, it's just that reminder of.
And they do here.
Yeah, they do hear, and they will remember things. I had a gentleman a number of years ago that had crashed his car and impacted the windshield. This is he's probably 6 feet tall, but probably, I feel like he weighed like 100 pounds. He was just as skinny and scrappy as he could be. And he was just kicking our tail. Very combative frontal head injury. And got him taken care of. And a few weeks later, he came by the station, and him and his mom, and he was thanking us and stuff. And I asked him, I said, do you remember anything from that night or from that afternoon? And he said, yeah, the one thing that I remember is that you guys all had your sunglasses on, and I couldn't see your eyes. So I didn't know whether I was okay or not. And that really, really set deeply with me. And I made sure that anytime I was in contact with a patient after that, that I did not have my sunglasses on. Because if that was his only mechanism to receive some sort of reassurance or comfort was to see what my eyes were telling him, and he couldn't do that, I felt really bad. So they do remember things, and there will be things that will set in. So just kind of keep that in mind when we're dealing with this. We don't know their struggles. We don't know what has put them in this situation, and it's nice to be nice. So when we are looking at some of our restraint medications, these are kind of the things that we would like to have when we're looking at selecting a medication. We'd like it to have a good onset, be well tolerated, not have a bunch of side effects, and have a relatively short duration of action, 15 minutes to an hour. Really, a lot of times we just need these guys to stop fighting, and then their body will take over and let them nap all on their own. So these are kind of the things that we have available to us. We have our benzos, which are going to be Valium and Versed. We have our butyrophenone, which we used to have 2 of them. We used to have a napsine and Haldol. Now we only have Haldol. And we have our NMDA receptor antagonist, which is going to be ketamine. And when we look at choosing which medication we want to use, Haldol can work in various different situations. The biggest drawback to Haldol is the timeline. It is only prescribed for IM use. We do have a large central Denver agency that
Oh my God.
I work at the shop.
that may or may not give Haldol IV. That is off prescription, and so when they do so at their own risk. When you pull Haldol up in the PDR, it says nothing about IV use. So, and we have some docs that'll give it that way too. And again, that's at their liability. But it does work well. It can work really well on your alcohol-only patients. But then you're trusting that they say, I only did alcohol.
Right.
They also only had 2 beers, so.
Right.
Or they didn't drink it all.
They didn't drink it. It was a long time ago. I was mowing the lawn. Psych patients, regardless on psych patients, Haldol should be your choice. If they are known bipolars, schizophrenics, multiple personality disorders, any of those things, Haldol should be your choice. It will work the best and the fastest on those patients. And then isolated frontal lobe head injuries, Haldol can work quite well. We don't like to see Haldol used in conjunction with head injury and amphetamine use. Amphetamines lower your seizure threshold. Some head injuries can lower your seizure threshold, and then Haldol can lower your seizure threshold. So then we run the risk of putting them in a status seizure. Frontal lobe injuries we don't worry about very much. You don't see big seizure activity out of the frontal lobe. You see big seizure activity from the hemispheres. So we don't worry about that so much when they come here. And then anytime we're looking at our excited delirium patients, our amphetamine-based patients, we should be choosing ketamine or a benzodiazepine. So Valium doesn't work well because we have to have an IV started. And if you can get an IV, you probably don't need ketamine. But Versed or ketamine, we can give IM and get it going on them. I guess we'll go through each one of these a little bit more. Other things about Haldol, it still carries a black box warning for widening the QT interval. We've never seen that, there's never been a reported case of it in an EMS setting. The cases that brought about the black box warning for both Haldol and the napsine came out of surgical centers that were giving very, very high doses of this. Anesthesiologists were giving very high doses of it. Like with a napsine, you'd have had to have carried, I think, 30 vials to reach the amount that they were giving, and we used a half of that.
No,
We can see some transient side effects with Haldol. Sometimes you'll see some transient blood pressure issues. You can see extrapyramidal effects. Do you guys know what those are? It's a very bizarre allergic type reaction to Haldol, and it causes muscle spasms or tics. And most commonly we'll see it up from like the shoulders up. So they might have their head drawn down like they have a big torticollis, or they can't move their neck. Sometimes we see the Joker smile. It draws their cheeks back in this really super tight smile, and they can't release it. Or they might get like a tongue tick, that kind of thing, and they'll just keep doing it. So we fix that by giving it Benadryl. And we can see some people that are using Haldol recreationally that may have extrapyramidal effects, and that's why somebody's calling 911 because they're in so much pain from the muscle spasm. And then we still fix that with giving them Benadryl. And then some of our psych patients, again, with bad antipsychotic mixtures, we can sometimes see that presentation of neuroleptic malignant syndrome. The dose for it is 10 milligrams IM. It can be repeated, or you can move on to another drug. And then to just kind of touch base really quick on our wide QT intervals, and this should play a part for you guys, even at your special events. You guys should keep this in the back of your mind. We have people out there that have wide QT syndrome, which means that they were born with it, and they have it every day. And when they go to some of these sporting events and really dehydrate and it changes their electrolyte levels, it can widen that QT interval a little bit more, which then they run the risk of having an R on T phenomenon, which will stop the heart. So these are going to be, sometimes when we see those kids or hear those stories about the kid who just dropped dead on the football field, or there was a kid in Broomfield about a year ago after a cross-country meet that dropped dead right on the field. Those are going to be those kids. And that's why we're really seeing that big push to do 12 leads on high school athletes. It's about 2% of our high school population has YQT syndrome, and we need to keep them from playing high energy contact sports. They should golf.
Right.
They should golf or join the debate team.
Mm-hmm.
We can debate
Maybe
that,
chess. And then that's what that's going to kind of look like. So after your little QRS and that really wide section before it hits that next bump, that's going to be that QT interval. And that this should be much smaller.
You want a pointer?
That's the last one.
Okay.
But just know that we can also see sometimes adults that can go into this because of bad electrolyte disturbances and that kind of thing. So just something to kind of keep in the back of your mind because you guys do cover so many special events and big sporting events. With our benzos, we have Versed and Valium. Versed is our most versatile because we can give it so many different ways. And you guys can give Versed IM or IN is going to be your best route. If you can get it in through their nose and not wear most of it, good luck. We recommend with both our benzos and ketamine that you are splitting those doses into 2 syringes and giving them into 2 large muscle groups, whether it's the thigh, the butt, or biceps. That you're splitting it, the uptake will be much faster, and it will use more of the drug more effectively. So they'll go in meanies quicker. Nice.
You like quick?
And just keep in mind with Versed, especially because we just don't know what some of these folks have on board, you can see some pretty profound hypoxia sometimes, that their respiratory drive can really, really be knocked out. You won't see that with ketamine. Every now and then on a big polypharm patient that's really acting out, we might see that respiratory rate drop a little bit as their body's kind of ebbing and flowing through those different drugs. But you will see it with Versed. So ketamine would be our preference because it can also leave, if they're in that really hyper respiratory state, that it'll leave that intact and allow that buffer system to work. Remember with your ketamine that it is a weight-based drug, so we need to see weights or approximate weights documented on charts. That was part of the thing that we found through our QA/QI processes is that wasn't happening very often. And because it is a weight-based drug, when we're seeing like some of these 16-year-old girls, it's like, well, and it didn't work well, did they give them an appropriate dose? And it's also not a titrate to effect drug, and neither is Versed. It's a give them the drug. Here's your bucket of ketamine. We want you to stop acting out. If you give them 250 and you way underdose them, you may actually increase their combativeness because you've now put them into the party state of ketamine and not the therapeutic state.
So give them more?
And that is the antidote for recreational ketamine use is more ketamine. And we see a lot of that at the First Bank Center. I don't know how much of you guys see. We see a lot of it up there.
We saw quite a lot at Fish last year.
Yeah, they'll use
Not
like
as much
1
this
to
year,
2 milligrams per kilogram. I mean, it's a smaller dose, and then they get into a delirium state, and we just give them more to make them stop. Well,
It's
you
also-
wanted it. Here it is.
It's also often, if it's snorted, cut with coke,
Right.
which can mess things up big time.
Yes. Yes. Really isn't a lot that you're supposed to put up your nose.
Overall, that's what people do.
Maybe a little Flonase is a cork. Those kinds of things. I don't think powdery substances were intended of the schnitzel. And then we want to make sure that we're really documenting appropriately on all of these patients what your doses, what your outcomes, good or bad. Did you have to change therapies? Were you with them long enough that they started to come out of it and needed to either call for a secondary dose or to change over to Versed? And if you can get an EKG on them as soon as you can, that would be great. We also recognize that that just may not happen. And then those need to be reported up your chain so that they can get them to me.
And lady, I don't remember when last class, did we talk about the process, what they need to, I mean, you've got everything they need to document.
So we need document, and then we need an unusual circumstance report, and that can just be an email of just kind of a supplemental report of why and where and what. And include that if you had any other interactions with other agencies, if we need to be looking for another agency for a supplemental trip sheet, if you guys were just the on-site crew and we were handing them off, that tells us that we need to go find additional information someplace else. Okay. And the unusual circumstance report doesn't have to be a formalized form. I'm trying to get, North Metro made me one and I can't find the file of it. They're supposed to send it to me, but they've made me a PDF one that you can fill out that is just a generic form for other agencies. They made one for them that just has a name on it, but then they made a generic version of it. And I just need them to send it to me again so I can put it out. But it's just a quick box for it. And that just helps us in our report that we have to compile to get back to the BME for our waiver.
For if we take patients to Central Hospital.
No, if you give ketamine,
Oh,
it doesn't matter where they go, we have to
Where
have a
they go.
report on.
Oh,
It's waivered.
Yeah, because it's waivered, we have to report every use.
oh,
So even like if you guys are down at the convention center and you're handing off to Denver Health, we have to have an unusual circumstance report and some sort of, even if it's your short form of what you did, we have to have that
Just because you guys are our medical director?
because it's waivered.
And we
Because
fall under the
we
waiver.
asked for special permission to utilize this drug. It's not part of the current pharmacy list with the state.
yeah, we had an OFA 2 weeks ago with Denver, but it was one of those, we had no information on the patient, so it'd be hard to even track back. Of course, you have to go to the hospital room.
But even if they come in as a John Doe, we can track them. John Does receive all of the hospitals do a John Doe or Jane Doe coding system, and we can track them by day and time to find them back to their Doe status of when they find a name to match to them. So we're able to backtrack that.
Okay.
Takes a little bit of time, sometimes some tears, but we can do it. Cry a little sometimes. I love the things that you find in the EMS supply bin.
Those
I would recommend different restraints. Those may not go.
may not go well. One thing too I've noticed at the shows, usually somebody will come running and grabbing you saying there's some guy in the crowd that's hitting people. And usually by the time you get there, fortunately most of the times, there's at least 2 or 3 rather large dudes who are like standing there going, what do you want us to do? It's like, let's just gently get him on the ground.
Whatever you can,
And,
let's just do something.
Next thing you know, you're all in a big pile on the ground.
And it's very different. I mean, you guys could do a lot of the concerts and see mosh pits, but mosh dancing is very different from combative punching. It's
Yeah.
very different. So, and even some of the mosh guys lose their clothes, but we wish they wouldn't, but they do.
Have they found specific drugs that are linked to this excited delirium state?
Yeah, it's almost always going to be amphetamine based.
Okay.
Cocaine and meth are the most common. We do occasionally see some combo plates that include Molly, and then there's some of the synthetics out there. The one that we're really keeping an eye on and watching for right now, because we're seeing it in other states, we had one case 2 weeks ago up in Broomfield, is Flocka. Flocka is a new synthetic, and it is breaking through most of our chemical restraint stuff, even in hospital. This particular gentleman got several doses of propofol and etomidate to keep him down. And he was breaking through every 10 to 15 minutes. It was a very long night.
What about PCP?
We don't see PCP quite as much. We don't see the adverse LSD reactions that we used to see. I don't know if they just cleaned up LSD. I don't know. It's still out there.
Well,
It's still there.
They've learned how to use it.
last base nectar, we had a few patients where they had Molly and
So,
PCP.
and the other thing that we see at some of these raves is, and I don't know if you guys have heard of this, it's called skittling.
Oh, yeah.
Skittling
skittle
is
party.
everybody, they bring everything out of their mom and dad's drug cabinet and they
Or a
dump it into
bowl.
a bowl and they take a handful.
You need it.
So
Rainbow
we
party.
can see the most bizarre polypharm reactions coming out of that, because they can have everything from stuff that's very benign like estrogen.
Beta blockers.
Yeah, but if we see beta blockers, we can see some of our 12-hour sugar control meds like glyburide, glucophage, metformin. When you put those kind of drugs into a normal acting body that does not have sugar processing problems, it can kill them. It drives their sugar down, and those are slow release drugs, so it'll drive their sugar down for 12 hours. So they have to put them on sugar drips. They put them on bags of D10 to just keep running into them until those drugs reach their half-life. And then we can see, they've got grandma's Darvocet, and they've got, her Xanax, and whatever else may be in there. And so we can see very bizarre ebb and flow polypharm cases that come out of those.
How long does it take to get a touch screen back? Just out of curiosity.
Urines are the fastest, and that takes about, depending on how busy the lab is, about probably 10 to 15 minutes.
That's
Blood has to coagulate and then be spun down for a full tox screen, so it can take 20 to 25.
well, that's sure.
Urine's the fastest.
That's what I thought.
University got back to us pretty quick last year with base nectar.
Yeah.
Sometimes they can do, there's some of them, if they have their bedside stuff, they can put the cartridge in and check for a kind at a time, but can't do a full tox. So it is a very interesting world out there right now, especially with our drugs, and you have to stop saying base nectar because I have a lot of chest pain.
Because what?
Because it gives me a lot of chest pain.
Oh, yeah.
The guy with the big drums.
Well, especially after we had the guy fall 35 feet in the concrete. And the only thing that saved his ass was ricocheted off forklift.
North Metro has one at First Bank Center, and he didn't ricochet off anything
Straight down.
ever again.
No, he was done.
He is done.
One ricochet and he was
This
done.
guy, yeah.
He climbed the speakers like a spider monkey
Oh boy.
and fell off them.
So this guy was on a vent for 2 days, and when he came up, the vent started bitching, and in all the chaos and mayhem, his cell phone got lost.
Oh, well, okay. Then he won't be able to call his dealer.
And he was trying to get in. He was, and a security person watched him miss the top rail and just go straight back.
Oh boy.
That's why they're not back.
I got back down here.
Mhm.
So at these shows, if you guys end up at some of the shows, just be very careful.
Also, make
Could
sure you
get
put gloves
from
on.
heartbeat.
Yes,
I
please
will.
wear
I will
gloves.
take my ketamine and cocaine intake very slowly.
Mhm.
Yes. Decadence, Pretty Lights, Space Nectar. Those are our big ones that we have a lot of problems with. We see different stuff out of like fish and that
Right.
stuff. It's a little bit different crowd.
Mhm.
They can still act out, but they're more of that slow delirium.
Yeah.
Right.
And you're like, oh, buddy, you are pretty.
LSD and
What, and when you did the audits, what did you see most?
Most of what we saw is no documentation of weights and underdosing. And I think a lot of it just is that tentative, not familiar or comfortable with the drug, so people were only giving half doses, and then it not having good effect.
Would your recommendation be go more with the 5 instead of?
Most adult humans are going to be closer to 5. At the 5 milligrams per kilogram, even I would need 350 to 400.
Right.
If you're gonna give it to me, go ahead and give 400.
Right.
yeah, don't waste
I
a
just
lot.
want a nap.
So if you see anybody who's not like anybody who's my size or bigger, you can just pretty much dose them 500 and not worry about it.
I mean, it's a good estimation. You're a solid 250 dose. I bet you're close to 115 pounds.
120.
See?
I thought you were pointing at Art, I'm going, huh?
Yeah,
So-
it was like, wow.
She's my
speaking of
best
delirium.
friend, right? So we see bad effect with underdosing. What about overdosing?
Nothing. It doesn't change it. Once you make them go meanies, they're just meanies.
So the fear of overdosing is a bad thing
Yeah.
for you to have as a EMT or paramedic.
You were guessing on their weight, and if they're, adult stature, we know that they're probably going to be, average adult male is probably going to be about 170, or a little or higher. If they're tall, they're going to be 200 pounds. Even if they're thin, they're going to be 200 pounds.
Mhm.
So give them the dose.
So what about you have 7 foot 400-pound football player and you give him 500 and it does nothing to him?
Good luck.
Yeah, then you call in.
Phone a friend. We've had it
500
happen.
Call in, hi.
Colin,
Can I
we
give
did
more?
have a very, very large black man out of the north area that did get almost 1,000 by the time they were able to stop getting their asses beat.
Damn.
So,
Good
I mean, like the guy beating up that fence, that is a big man,
Oh,
a
yeah.
big muscular man, and whatever his metabolism rate is, it may need a little bit more. Make a phone call.
How far back do you think we've been seeing excited delirium and didn't recognize it for what it was?
I think a long time. I think
Okay.
back to some of the patients that I encountered early on in my career, back when we were doing scoop sandwiches and things like that. And we didn't have a name for it. And
Yeah.
I know now, it's like, oh my God, that was that guy.
Yeah.
That was the guy that was smoking cocaine and blew up his house. And now I know that that's what that was.
And we were blaming a lot of that on PCP
Yeah.
Mhm.
and giving him Halo.
What'd you do?
No, the guy one night, he ripped every door off in his
No,
house.
no, we didn't do any of those.
No, we don't talk about
We
that.
can't talk about that.
That or the DG sandwich.
It was effective.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Is
it
there a
worked.
drug called 2CP?
I don't know.
Okay, so I feel like,
It sounds
We
like a
had-
street name, if anything.
yeah, at my old job, we had a kid said that he took that and he went into some kind of
Yeah.
delirium.
So there are all different kinds of things that sit out there. Some of them are synthetic, some of them are natural. Stevia
Steve, right.
is one of them. It is not stevia, salvia is one of them. Salvia is a plant that grows here.
Right.
It's
All over
in
the place.
almost every city flower bed
Right.
Yeah.
in the summer because it grows so well here.
So
It gets a little
It's
purple
a
flower on
nice-
top of it.
Nice, pretty
It's
purple.
nice, pretty plant. Well, when you dry it and smoke it, it has huge hallucinogenic effects. It is completely harmless to your body unless you decide to jump out a window. It will do nothing to your body. And the hallucination effect lasts about 5 to 7 minutes. So as long as you don't fly off the earth in those 5 to 7 minutes, it won't kill you.
Nice.
But we can see really odd behavior. There's also a plant that grows around the area. It's called the trumpet flower. Great big dark leafed plant that blooms at night. It has a big trumpet flower. And kids will take those and brew them into tea. And they are huge hallucinogenics. The problem with that is they also are incredibly kidney toxic. They will kill your kidneys. And so it can kill kids, and it won't kill them today, it'll kill them next week. So there's all different kinds of things that we see out there. And if you think about the things that they put into meth, whoever the guy was that thought around, I'm going to sit in my garage and take all of these chemicals and make something cool, and then I'm going to smoke it.
Yeah.
I mean, he must have been really bored.
And then for another guy to do
They
it.
really
he's
can't
like,
go
Oh,
on
another
stupid
guy to
as
go,
the
oh,
chemist
this is
would.
awesome.
yeah.
On go like drugs.
My buddy's losing all his teeth. I want to lose my teeth.
I thought one of the coolest things, and sorry again for a base nectar, is there is a guy,
Why are you being like this?
well, there is a guy who was standing perfectly still, staring straight up, and he stood there. The cop said 30 minutes before they called, and he never moved. Just like,
You just tripped on.
I mean,